Hello, Epic Gamers! Welcome to another cast of Tooth and Tail Tournament Season 2. Today we'll be casting Hyilix vs Frodo and Scaff vs Bardas. Let's start with Hyilix vs Frodo, Game 1. In the north side of the map spawns Hyilix in Command Folkrat, and on the south side spawns Frodo in KSR Green. Both pairs are, I think, new on the scene. I've never heard of Frodo and only casted a few of Hyilix's games. Both players going for the interesting board tier 3. Interesting because it's not really that meta in this patch, this tourney patch. Frodo, in fact, not even going for any squirrels, choosing to go lizard only. Meanwhile, Hyilix goes for the standard squirrel with some pigeons for support of his tier 2 and tier 3. Both pairs bringing in defense. Frodo a nice MG, which is really nice in this choke point. He can defend his natural and his main base. Meanwhile, Hyilix has the balloon, which does grant him more vision. He can plop it down somewhere here and he'll see all over the river. He has this base is pretty protected, except there is technically a pathway over here, and Frodo could attack it with his lizards. The problem for Frodo is that he has only one tier 1, so when he would try to flank this with only lizards, he would leave his base quite exposed. Frodo should also be careful with this base on the high ground, because Hyilix could easily cliff abuse it. I think there's a little bit of a... You don't really see it, but behind the mill, I think there's like a little bit of a ramp which the commander can walk up to, and he should be able to see. Yeah, you can see the mill actually from the bottom, from the low ground with your commander, which if Hyilix is smart, he could easily use it to bring out some of his squirrels to try to take down the mill. And Frodo would not be able to do much with against it with only his lizards, because they are way shorter range. These skunks will help ward off any such attack though, so he's chilling right now. Both players relatively equal on farms. Hyilix building his defensive balloon, which will allow him to eco up way harder. Really smart from Hyilix. Frodo scouted that balloon, and he will respond with a tier 3. Relatively good play as well. He can even eco up if he wanted to. It's not like Hyilix is going to attack with his defense. Of course, balloon does a lot of alpha damage, so balloons do technically counter boars. I myself have used balloon walls against boars a few times for great effect, but at the same time boar has so much HP that even a balloon shot doesn't do that much. So it's not like a perfect defense, not if the balloons die really fast or if you don't target fire the boar. Because if your opponent is clever, he can just lead with his tier 1 units. Frodo expanding even more and going high tech into tier 2. Hyilix just now getting into the bar. Well, 40 seconds ago going into the bar. But it doesn't really matter. Both players will start building the bar at almost the same time, because Frodo's was delayed, because he was foot stuck, supply blocked. Frodo doesn't need to attack though. He can just keep on defending. With his third mill, he's now ahead on economy. Hyilix. Hyilix does know about the expansion, but he's building balloons instead of expanding himself or building more army, which is a little bit of a misplay. You don't really want to be building defenses when you know your opponent is expanding. That's the classic rock, paper, scissors of the strategies in strategy games. Expansions beats expanding, beats defensive play beats offensive play, and offensive play beats expansion play. And Hyilix right now is defending against somebody who's expanding. So Frodo can just chill, knowing he has the bigger army. The graph is only big because of the balloons, which can't attack. And Frodo's still making more money. Hyilix is trying to secure his another forward expansion over here, trying to build a balloon here. But Frodo sees this, and he might want to stop it. He might try a little bit of a harass with his skunks. Those will do nothing against the boar. Ooh, but Frodo almost gets triggered and attacks, but I think it was pretty smart comeback. Not committing into it, because he walked through so much gas. He would have totally lost that fight. In a few seconds these balloons will be up, which should secure this base for Frodo. I mean for Hyilix. Frodo himself is building a defensive MG as well. Ooh, unfortunate commander death for Frodo, but his army will commit now. Ooh. And while Frodo does win the fight, I think, in army value. Yeah, he does win by double value. He does lose the boar, which does give Hyilix the temporary tech advantage. Oh, Frodo in fact sells his own boar. I think that's a bit of a misplay. It was only like 30 seconds away from finishing building, so yeah. Ooh, Hyilix manages to save the boar nicely. And all of these falcons now almost get shredded by those balloons, but they actually do have enough DPS to kill those balloons. Even manages to snipe down a mill, and Hyilix has almost no anti-air left! And these pigeons are keeping the falcon army alive for Frodo. There just isn't enough DPS in Hyilix's army to deal with those falcons. Luckily Hyilix does have the boar, which does allow his ranged troops to survive the battle, because the boar tanks all the damage. Ooh. Frodo target fires the boar and snipes it. Hyilix tries now to do some cliff abuse on the almost mined out mill, but it's a bit too late to be effective. In fact, just loses his skunks. Bit unfortunate. Frodo has almost his third mill completely built up, and Hyilix is starving. Well, not starving like officially, but he's running out of resources, and he will soon start officially starving. Nice attack from Frodo, catching the army without a commander, and wipes the floor clean. This will be a win for Frodo. And Hyilix steps. Let's go into game 2. Hyilix versus Frodo. Game 2. Hyilix on the south side of the map in Common Folk Red, and Frodo spawns in the east in KSR Green. Both players swapping up their decks. Frodo keeps the lizards, but swaps the rest of his deck actually. Just keeps the skunk, but now has crows, ferrets, scavengers, and the owl. Good for pushing, and good for a late game with the owl, but not a bad deck, but it's quite unorthodox. I haven't seen something like this, I think, yet in the tournament. Meanwhile, Hyilix also changing up his deck, also choosing the ferrets, knowing Frodo went with MGs previously, and chooses to take the wolf instead of the boar, and also swaps his balloons for some MGs. Frodo is doing a little bit of a lizard rush. Except he's not attacking, which means he's just behind on economy right now. Doesn't even... I mean, he forces an MG, but doesn't do anything for him. He expands, builds a farm, and he'll try to at least build some momentum up. Based on the fact that Hyilix does have a little bit of food tied up in the MG. Hyilix is using his defensive advantage now to tech into tier 2, which is pretty clever from him. And Frodo gets the economic advantage using his expansion. Hyilix mirrors the expansion and expands himself. And moves up the MGs in front. Meanwhile, Frodo is just ecoing up, knowing Hyilix can't really attack him with his 3 squirrels. With so much food tied up in the defenses. Hyilix should realize he's not really in danger of being attacked. And that he should maybe invest more into money or army, depending on what he wants to do. Ooh, Frodo attacking into some ferrets. Seeing the defensive play from Hyilix, he will capitalize on the first long range and will try to break Hyilix's fortress here. Hyilix has no idea this is about to happen. In 20 seconds, the ferrets will be built, and he will realize he's completely screwed because he has no army. In fact, Hyilix is still behind on economy. Frodo 5 farms ahead. Hyilix knows perfectly well that how many farms Frodo has, but still decides to invest into his defensive buildings. It's an unfortunate misplay from Hyilix. Ooh, I don't know if he saw the ferrets. Hyilix not satisfied with his scout. He will try to scout again. Ooh, Frodo doubling down on his ferrets. And going into even more tier 2. You don't really need 4 ferrets. And you should really just use them to pressure instead of attacking behind them. They're not a good defensive tool. They are really an offensive tier 2, which this unfortunately gives Hyilix time to prepare and goes into his own tier 3. Meanwhile, Frodo goes into the owl. And Hyilix now has a big enough army that those ferrets can't really do much against it, or at least are not so effective as they would have been before. Frodo on 16 farms, meanwhile Hyilix is 4 farms behind. With the owl almost out for Frodo, this is looking pretty advantageous for Frodo. He has the eco advantage and the army advantage. He has almost an army advantage, which is to say he doesn't have the army advantage, but that's mainly coming from those MGs on Hyilix. Owl already out for Frodo and a second one coming in. I would even plop down a third one, but Frodo decides to play it conservatively and buys a third ferret tier 2, completely overkill. Like, that doesn't even do anything. They'll just shoot the same tile probably and kill the one unit 60 times. Fun fact, you only need to kill a unit 1 time to kill it. So, bit of wasted money there, I would say. This gives Hyilix a bit of a chance to come back. Hyilix just trying to hold on until his wolf gets out. Using this road to his advantage, he might be able to snipe down the owl. Instead, just gets 2 skunks. That's still pretty good. This gas is completely weakening Hyilix's units, but he manages to save most of his tier 2. The owl is almost out. I mean, Wolf is almost out for Hyilix, and is on his way to his army right now. Wolf finally starts buffing Hyilix's army, but unfortunately his army just got wiped, so there was not much for the Wolf to buff. But now, with the Wolf out, the tide might start turning against Frodo's favor. Or in Hyilix's favor. 2 owls on the field though, for Hyilix. Ooh. The waves, mice waves coming in piecemeal. This allowed Hyilix to clear up the mice, and he actually manages to trade relatively evenly in the fight, but actually trades horribly. Actually, he loses way more value than Frodo. It was just mice after all, I guess. And now with the barrage of artillery, Frodo is sieging Hyilix's home base, destroying warrants, destroying economy, and with the wolf down, almost down. With the wolf almost dead, we can confidently say that Frodo outplayed his opponent, and he will take game 2. Frodo takes the game 2 and is on a match point now. Let's get into game 3. Hyilix spawns in the western corner as Common Folk Red, and Frodo spawns as KSR Green in the north. Both players once again swapping out their units. Frodo still keeping his lizards but going into some toads now, and also takes some falcons. Meanwhile, Hyilix takes some snakes and goes into some chameleons. I haven't seen, yeah, chameleons instead of scavengers. Instead of raccoons. Frodo does have a nice side base over here, which is really protected quite well by this wall, even if there is a little bit of a pathway of an attack here. It's quite choky, which means it's not that good for an attack. And he does also have this nice forward base on a high ground. Hyilix is protected by a nice river, and he also has a relatively nice expansion here, but this base is a little bit exposed to cliff abuse. And the abuser is also protected by this river, which means it would be pretty hard to dislodge them. Standard opening from both players, just going into some tier 1s. And Frodo almost goes for the expansion. Hyilix waiting for the expansion to be bought and mirrors. And Frodo starts stacking and farming up. Meanwhile, Hyilix does the same. Frodo farms up as well, even harder. Hyilix trying to farm up a little bit more, but Frodo scouts it and will respond by attacking. Maybe he does have even army value, but decides for the quick tier 3. Hyilix might scout to this. But is worried about the army on his doorstep and decides to fall back. Floating huge amounts of food right now. Not knowing the wolf is even coming out, he decides to eco up hugely instead. which is not necessarily a misplay. If you manage to defend, this would give Hyilix a huge advantage. For a little bit at least. Frodo could always decide to use his wolf for economic purposes, which would even it out at least. In the short term, in long term, then Frodo would have the advantage because of the wolf. And Frodo is deciding to support his wolf with some falcons. And Hyilix is doubling down on some chameleons. Did he scout the wolf? Hyilix does scout the wolf and buys some snakes and chameleons as a response. Wolf is 30 seconds away from being finished. Hyilix is floating huge amounts of food. Should buy something before Frodo decides to attack, so he can actually defend. Double falcon. Frodo still posturing in front of his base. Frodo is quite a bit ahead on food value because he had way more time to farm. But the wolf is out now, so Frodo might start well, doing a lot of things. Attacking maybe. He decides to sit back instead. Uses wolf for a defensive advantage. In fact, macros his wolf back so they can, yeah, start buffing the pigs. Clever use of the wolf from Frodo. And he even decides to eco up on his third base. Now it's now the ball is in Hyilix's court. How will he respond? Will he finally go into his tier 3? Yes. Now the longer time goes on, the more advantage Frodo will get. Frodo does scout this mill and will try to snipe it. Ooh, pulls back. Not a bad decision. He could have been caught from the side, which would have not been ideal. So good conservative moves from Frodo. He does have the better army though, with the wolf. So now that he knows the army is here, he should try attacking it. Unfortunately, the toads completely blow themselves up on the chameleons, and horrible trade for Frodo. This allows Hyilix to build up his farms safely, and will even start. Finally buys the wolf himself. Now both players are relatively even on the economy and army value. Still anybody's game. Again, the commander death, really quite unfortunate for Hyilix. This does allow Frodo to take a relatively good fight. The poison tags are really nice. Takes out one falcon. Luckily, Frodo did not decide to fight Hyilix's army, which means the commander death wasn't that big of a catastrophe. Especially not in front of... Well, Hyilix is about to get a huge power spike with the wolf. Meanwhile, Frodo is just buying more farms on his mill, trying to get even more ahead. He's going to try to force a fight here. The wolf is out, but not buffing the army. Unfortunately, Hyilix's indecision does allow Frodo to take a lot of value and snipe down the mill. But on the retreat, Hyilix does get a lot of falcons. Hyilix should decide what he wants to do. He is floating huge amounts of food. He does have the army advantage on him, but he needed to attack right then. Instead, he's staying on the defensive, despite knowing that Frodo does have the economic advantage. Every second that Hyilix waits, he's getting further and further behind. Hyilix is completely scared of Frodo, despite having the bigger army. Throwing away his advantage right now, trying to go for a flank, while Frodo is going to snipe the mill, delaying Hyilix's economy even longer. Hyilix finally decides to fight, snipes down most of the Falcons, but loses his own commander. There's a little bit of defensive advantage for Hyilix, but luckily Helix's army is strong enough and takes a favorable trade. The Snake's really doing a really good job over there. Snaking, poisoning all those units. But Hyilix is running out of steam. He is starving, actually. Almost starving. It says... Ooh, almost sniping down that mill. Getting a few poison tags. And another fight erupts. The mill goes down, and the wolf goes with it. Almost goes with it. The single pigeon heroically saving his bureaucratic hero. But Hyilix is starving right now, so he needs to purchase the mill, or at least finish Frodo off. Ooh. And Frodo's economy is... Frodo's economic advantage is finally showing itself. As Frodo does get the bigger army value. Ooh, the mill tanking doing a really good job, but the wolf snipe. Ooh, really good job from Frodo sniping down that wolf. Hyilix really needed to pursue over there, trying to try to get that Frodo's wolf's kill at least. Hyilix could have totally had an opportunity there to destroy the rest of Frodo's army, but instead is too scared and pulls back. He does sell off his wolf burn, which means he's forever behind in technology right now, and I think for Frodo, the wolf has been doing a really good job right now for the whole game, and it will be probably what will win the game for him as well. But Hyilix is ahead on the commander now, so it's Frodo's job to attack. And army values are actually pretty even. So Hyilix does still have a chance, even getting even more ahead, buying that 5th mill. Oh! But Frodo trying to take that the battle from a different side, but decides against it in the end. Hyilix really must be really careful to not lose that commander. Ooh, Frodo! Again trying from a different flank, but probably doesn't want to go through this tight choke point. Goes around instead. He might try to snipe down the mill from the north. Instead, gets into a fight, loses all of his lizards to the chameleons. Toads exploding on the chameleons, and Hyilix somehow managing to take a really good trade again. Finally decides to push. Macros his snakes, snipes down the wolf, and with that, Hyilix takes the win, probably. Really soon. And Frodo taps. 2 versus 1. Hyilix manages to eke out a win. And delays his defeat by 1 more game. Let's see if Frodo will finish Hyilix off with his match point, or if Hyilix will even out the score and take us to game 5. Hyilix, once again, swapping out his deck, taking the Badger, the strongest tier 3, or at least the most fun to play. And Frodo, once again, swapping out his deck, going for squirrels this time. Finally tired of his lizard-only meta, or strategy, and going back to the owl. Giving up the wolf. Both players have relatively defendable expansions on their sides. Helix's base is pretty open, so if Frodo wanted to build just... Ooh. Frodo probably forgets that he did not build his northern farm. Ooh, luckily doesn't. Realizes he did not build it and builds it. Yeah, Frodo could totally start sniping Hyilix's pigs with his lizards. He could be flanking from this side, depending on where Hyilix's army is positioned. And get some free value. So let's hope we will see something like that. Frodo is trying to... He's just positioning his squirrels in the middle of the map for some reason. Hyilix is a little bit scared and builds an MG. Not the best position exactly. I would have at least built it on a corner or something. This one is also not really covering anything. Lizards could just snipe this mill from the other side, but it's also relatively protected. So it's not the worst MG positioning. And here Frodo comes, goes for a flank. Hyilix does notice it. Ooh. Frodo, trying to snipe down the mill, loses all of his lizards and even squirrels. Loses 180 food of value just for sniping the mill, which costs only 60. Really huge misplay from Frodo, giving a huge advantage to Hyilix. Tries to at least farm up on the back of it. Knowing Hyilix is not very likely to attack, judging by his past games. Hyilix really scared of another attack. Buys even more MGs, which gives Frodo enough space to, well, just eco up and get ahead. Hyilix does have some skunks, which are good for against tier 1, but not that good against lizards. And Frodo, using the fact that Hyilix is spending so much money on defense to just completely eco up his second mill. Frodo does scout this and goes into some eco of his own. He should sell off his defenses and either go into tier 3 or eco up, even up the economy. Frodo goes into double skunk. Double skunk isn't bad, but it's really only useful when the enemy has a lot of tier 1, which Hyilix isn't exactly massing right now. Yes! Hyilix does go into the Badger, trying to take up. Meanwhile, Frodo does go into the Owl at all the same time. Badger does beat Owl, at least in smaller numbers. But Owl can also easily kill the Badger with alpha mace damage. Depends on the skill of the players, but it's easier to play the Badger in this case than the Owl. Frodo does have a lot of scavengers, raccoons, which do relatively well against the Badger. They do have high alpha damage, and he does also have snakes. So if he scouts the fact that Frodo has, that Hyilix has a Badger, he could just start building snakes and just poison him down. Both players at least even on economy, but Frodo once again getting even more ahead, building the third mill. Hyilix is still wasting a lot of food on these MGs. He could start building a second Badger and pay for it with if he sold these off. It is really quite a huge misplay, because he really needs to be attacking Frodo now, since he does have an expansion and will start getting ahead even more. Frodo does scout the Badger and responds with double snake, which is really good against the Badger, which means Hyilix really should push immediately when his Badger comes out, before those snakes get out. Now decides to sell the MGs, and once again floating huge amounts of food. Not really the perfect situation to be in, but his army is still way bigger than Frodo's. Has just way more eco. Ooh, really good micro flank from Frodo. But the Badger is revved up and he loses the mill. He really needs to disengage. Hyilix needs to pursue. He has the advantage right now, but the snakes did come out, which will make it way more dangerous for this Badger. Hyilix should probably build a few more pigeons just for the extra support, but at least he's not forced to attack right now since the economies are even, and he did get a lot of value over there. If he loses this Badger, it's probably game over, so better not risk it. He can just eco up a little bit more. Although with these two owls popping out mice, it might not be so easy keeping the values even. Tries a little bit of Badger macro. The Badger is almost exposed, but macros hits back. It's almost full rev. The huge poison on the Badger though. Oh, the pigeons were just healing some skunks, not healing the Badger, and the Badger dies. Really unfortunate for Hyilix. Hyilix can't pay for anything right now. He needs to sell those MGs, start building the Badger. Does not sell off the MG, so his Badger is left in the limbo. Finally starts building again, and he will be able to clean up this mice wave for pretty much free. Loses only a few squirrels. These 4 skunks are really helping him, and these pigeons keeping everything alive. It's really nice for Hyilix. Frodo economing up even more, now ahead on the army. Knows he can afford it. Getting ahead while being ahead. Getting just free value from these squirrel waves. Skunk waves. Mice waves. Both players really close to each other. These MGs are pretty good, but you should really sell off these in the back. They are not doing anything. But you can't really micro back right now with your armies being this close to each other. Badger is finally out for Hyilix. Hyilix is floating so much food, he should buy more tier 2. He knows Frodo has a lot of skunks, so he shouldn't really be buying more tier 1. That isn't really productive at this point. Skunk's getting huge value on both sides. Badger getting a little bit of rev, but gets macro too far back in this fight, not doing anything. Frodo goes immediately to try to snipe down the Badger, but the skunk gas is completely destroying Frodo's army. Frodo doesn't have any pigeons, which means his army just got weakened hugely in that fight. The Badger almost dies, but the hero pigeons save its life. Hyilix microing his pigeons to actually heal his Badger instead of wasting their shots on some useless skunks. Nice micro from Hyilix, saving that Badger. And he is in a really good place right now, getting winning that fight quite handily with his skunks and pigeons. Getting into another fight. All these exposed tier 1 on the side, getting sniped down by the Badger. Frodo trying to keep his owl alive, but Frodo is a little bit ahead on eco, but ooh. Fighting around this high ground. It's not the best thing, but ooh, the Badger getting a little bit too ahead. Instantly getting microed into by Frodo, sniped down by those snakes. Frodo does kill the Badger, which does even out the situation a little bit. Hyilix once again caught being unable to pay for his tier 3. Ooh, Frodo using the owl to tank, a risky maneuver, but it paid off. The owl did not die, and he got a little bit of value from that. Hyilix really needs to sell off some things to start building the Badger again. The Badger was the winning move. Building the Badger is the winning move. Or at least sell off the Badger and start building way more tier 1. Well, I guess not, because Frodo does have the skunks. They were dead for quite a long time over there. So ooh, Hyilix finally decides to sell off those MGs in the back and placing his army in such a way that they were able to defend the mill quite effectively even without him, his presence. Now manages to attack and snipe down some of those dirty snakes. Unfortunately doesn't have enough tier ranged units. So unable to snipe down the owl. And still both players supply boxed to a horrendous degree. If either player went home and sold off a little bit, it would be so much better for them. So much food just being caught up in the wrong places, in the warrants instead of units. These pigeons are doing a lot of work for Hyilix right now though. Just keeping his army alive through the gas, through the damage, through the mice. A really tense fight in the middle. Frodo constantly trying to get a little bit of value, trying to snipe down Hyilix's units with his snakes. Using the owl for tanky, but overextends! Finally loses it. Hyilix manages to get enough scrolls to actually snipe down the owl. Which drops Frodo's value massively, and his army gets caught out and loses almost all tier 3. Even his mill is almost mined out and will start starving soon. And Hyilix will come to deal the final blow. Cleans up Frodo's army. Frodo actually has a lot of food. Just got up in warrants. He would have totally won that fight. He can still sell off, but gives up, knowing the momentum was no longer in his favor. And Hyilix manages to eke out a win over a very painful and long game. And we're on game 5. Both players on a match point. Winner of this game will determine the winner of the match. Frodo, seeing how effective the Badger was for Hyilix, decides to go into Badger of his own and also take some ferrets, seeing that Hyilix used the MGs quite effectively the previous game, even if he should have sold off some of them earlier. Also gives up on the lizards and takes the pigeons for support instead. Hyilix goes back to the boar instead of taking the Badger, and not taking any MGs, deciding to swap his deck so he doesn't get auto-countered by Frodo, which is pretty smart even if the Badger was a pretty good tier 3. Hyilix losing a lot of mining time, not building his farm, not bringing back, losing like 20 food of momentum, but not the end of the world, the food will get mined out eventually. Hyilix also taking some snakes himself, seeing how well Frodo used them. And that's really good for Frodo, I mean Hyilix, because he will be able to counter Frodo's Badger. Map-wise, Frodo does have a relatively nice expansion next to his mill, but Hyilix really doesn't have a good expansion. This one is kind of good. It's hard to attack into with this tight choke point, but at the same time Frodo can also just use this choke point to attack the pigs on the side quite easily. And there really isn't a lot of space on this the mill side of this choke point, so if Frodo decides to just use his Badger to start getting some value, getting some rev, Hyilix's units won't be able to deal that much damage to it, depending on how they're positioned around the mill. So this choke point will really be what the game will be turning around, revolving around, and the one who will use it the best will win the game probably. Hyilix does recognize the importance of long-range units in this fight and starts building some skunks. Frodo tries to jump on the opportunity of Hyilix scouting, but walking through a choke point against the defensive army is not really the smartest idea and decides to pull back, luckily losing only 2 squirrels, and decides to expand himself. Hyilix already ahead 1 farm and finally has the skunk out, which will shut down any aggression from Frodo. This choke point will be completely unusable and impassable. Frodo is building double chameleon though. Tries some fancy stuff, but fortunately fails and loses another huge amount of value on the defensive. Frodo trying to do things, but unfortunately pushing too early, not waiting for both of his chameleons. The chameleons are actually really good for this choke point because they cannot be shot at while they're moving through, and skunk gas doesn't really do anything against them. Frodo trying to do some nice cam maneuvers. This will get him a lot of value. These pigs are completely exposed. Hyilix can't really do anything about this. Gets 3 pigs, but ooh, only 3 pigs, and not rallying those chameleons back. That's a bit unfortunate from Frodo. Losing all those pigs puts the value loss at even. They're even on value, except that Frodo lost army. So now Hyilix can just push his advantage, and Frodo has no anti-air troops and no army left to counter the falcons. Unfortunately, Frodo's misplays cost him the game. It was a really nice maneuver, but unfortunately not that well executed, I guess. Losing his chameleons. And Hyilix, with his air supremacy, will be able to take game 5 and win the match. Frodo is trying to do stuff, but this air supremacy just completely shutting him down. He gets one falcon out, kills one falcon, but he's completely out-ecoed, out-armied, and outplayed. And Hyilix takes the game, set, and match. Congratulations to Hyilix, getting that coveted victory. And congratulations on Frodo too. He had really good plays. He played consistently well, but Hyilix takes the win anyway. Manages to outplay Frodo in the end. Now, let's get ready for the next match.